The sky was a heavy gray the day Olivia passed away. In that small, quiet village nestled among rice paddies and bamboo groves, time seemed to freeze. Noah stood at the edge of the hospital bed, his hands trembling as he gently closed her eyes for the last time. Her face still carried the traces of warmth, as if she had simply fallen asleep, but he knew she was gone. There are certain moments in life when the soul is too stunned to cry. For Noah, this was one of them. The woman he had loved since they were teenagers, the mother of his 2 children, she was no longer in this world. And yet, as the doctors quietly stepped out of the room and the machines fell silent, a new sound emerged, the soft, helpless cries of their newborn daughter, Emma. Noah turned to look at the tiny bundle in the nurse's arms. Just minutes old, she had arrived in this world as her mother was leaving it. The contrast was almost cruel in its symmetry. Behind him, little Jacob, barely 3 years old, clutched at his pant leg, too young to understand the gravity of what had just happened, but old enough to feel that something had changed forever. That night, Noah didn't sleep. He sat by the window, Emma cradled against his chest, Jacob asleep beside him. Rain tapped gently against the glass like soft whispers of the past. In that quiet darkness, grief settled deep into his bones, but so did something else, resolve. A promise was forming within him, slow and steady, born from pain but rooted in love. He didn't say it out loud, there was no need. It was etched into his very breath, into the way he held his children, into the silence that stretched between each heartbeat. He would raise them alone. No matter how hard, no matter how lonely, he would be both mother and father to them. They would never feel abandoned. They would never feel unloved. That was the last gift he could give Olivia, to keep her love alive in the way he raised their children. Over the weeks that followed, Noah buried his sorrow beneath daily tasks. Cooking, cleaning, changing diapers, consoling nightmares, every small act became an expression of his promise. Sometimes, late at night when exhaustion pressed against him like a weight, he would think of Olivia, not just as the woman he loved, but as the friend who had once laughed with him beneath the stars, who had held his hand through storms, who had believed in him when he doubted himself. There were moments when he wished he could grieve more freely, but grief had no room where responsibility lived. He would let himself cry only when both children were asleep, their breath steady and warm beside him. Even then, he cried quietly, careful not to wake them. He didn't want them to grow up seeing his pain. He wanted them to grow up seeing his strength. And so, with each passing day, Noah built a new life, not out of choice, but out of necessity. Not out of certainty, but out of love. A love that was no longer shared with a partner, but now completely devoted to 2 small souls who needed him more than anything. And though the pain remained like a shadow he carried everywhere, so too did the promise. Mornings came early for Noah. While the rest of the village was still lost in sleep, he would already be awake, standing barefoot in the kitchen, fixing breakfast with one hand while holding Emma with the other. The scent of scrambled eggs, slightly burnt toast, and warm milk filled the small house, a ritual that grounded him in a world that no longer felt familiar. Raising 2 children alone was not a path he had chosen, but it had become his purpose. Jacob, now 4, was beginning to ask questions about his mother. "Why can't Mommy come home?" he once whispered, tracing circles on Noah's arm with his tiny finger. The question came like a knife through quiet air, one Noah had known would come, but could never truly prepare for. He paused, looked at Jacob with eyes that had seen too much too soon, and answered in the gentlest voice he could manage, "Because she's in the sky now, watching over us. She's always with you, even if you can't see her." That night, Jacob insisted on placing a small drawing by the window, stick figures of the 3 of them holding hands with Olivia in the sky, a smiling sun beside her. Noah didn't say a word. He just stood there for a long while after Jacob had fallen asleep, the picture still fluttering slightly in the breeze, and let his chest rise and fall with silent grief. Each day, Noah walked a tightrope between strength and exhaustion. There were school runs, doctor appointments, spilled juice, temper tantrums, lullabies, and night terrors. There were forgotten lunches he would rush to deliver and scraped knees he would kneel to kiss. His world was measured in small details, the exact way Emma liked her bedtime bottle warmed, the one story Jacob always asked for before sleep, the slight cough that meant a cold was coming. He never complained. He couldn't afford to. While others saw only a quiet man devoted to his children, they did not see the sacrifices hidden beneath the surface. They didn't see the dreams deferred, the job promotions he turned down because they required overtime, the friends he slowly lost touch with, the hobbies that once defined him now collecting dust in a corner of the attic. Evenings were not for leisure or self-care, but for laundry, lesson plans, and grocery lists written half asleep. There was no audience for his fatigue, no applause for the nights he stayed up holding Emma through a fever or helping Jacob memorize spelling words for a test he would later ace. His sacrifices were not heroic in the grand sense of the word. They were quiet, constant, and unseen, woven into the fabric of daily life, like threads of a tapestry only he knew he was weaving. And still, in all of it, there was love. Not the sweeping, cinematic kind, but the real, grounded kind. The love that endures through repetition, that shows up every day without fanfare. The love that keeps a man going when his own heart is breaking. Sometimes, in the rare silence after the children had gone to sleep, Noah would sit by the window with a cup of lukewarm tea, staring at the moon. He would think of Olivia and of the life they had imagined together. He would wonder who he was becoming. Not just a father, but a different kind of man, one who found strength in sacrifice, meaning in routine, and joy in the smallest victories. And though no one said it and no one saw it, no one knew what he was doing mattered. Not for recognition, but for Jacob and Emma, for their futures, for their safety, for their sense of love that would one day form the foundation of the people they would become. He carried it all, the memories, the responsibilities, the loneliness, with quiet dignity. And that was his greatest act of love. Time, as it always does, moved forward, even if grief lingered in the stillness between hours. Noah never truly stopped missing Olivia, but there came a point when the solitude grew heavy enough to ache. The silence in the house, once filled with the voices of two children and the quiet hum of a grieving man, began to echo with something else, loneliness. It wasn't desperation, not exactly. It was the realization that the burden of carrying everything alone might one day crush him from the inside. So when Grace entered his life, she felt like an answer to a question he hadn't dared to ask. She was poised, warm on the surface, and quick to smile in the presence of his children. At first, it felt like sunlight cracking through a heavy cloud. He told himself he deserved another chance, at companionship, at building something again, and not being alone in the quiet. Grace said all the right things. She admired his resilience, marveled at the gentleness with which he raised Jacob and Emma. She said she understood the depth of loss, though she never spoke much of her past. For a while, it was enough. The children responded to her kindness. Jacob, ever observant, seemed to look for his father's cues, and when Noah smiled, Jacob did too. Emma was too young to grasp what was shifting, but she adapted easily, as children often do. The wedding was modest, quiet, a simple gathering of close friends. Noah didn't want to make a spectacle of it, just a clean start, a new chapter. But even as he slipped the ring on Grace's finger, a part of him hesitated, barely a flicker, barely a whisper. He ignored it. At first, it worked. Grace tried. She played the role with care, helped with homework, organized the kitchen, introduced new routines. But it was different. Her affection came with rules, with unspoken expectations. What had once been soft slowly hardened into structure. The way Jacob sometimes looked at her, confused, cautious, began to stir discomfort in Noah's chest. Emma, still too young to articulate her feelings, had started waking up at night, whimpering for no clear reason. There were small signs first. Grace becoming impatient when Jacob struggled with his reading, dismissing Emma's tantrums as manipulative rather than the cries of a toddler. Noah would intervene, gently, but each time it chipped away at something delicate between them. He tried to convince himself it was adjustment. Change always brings resistance, he told himself. He tried to balance, defend the children without provoking Grace's defensiveness, uphold the marriage without sacrificing his instincts as a father. But the middle ground grew thinner with time. And then came the breaking point. One evening, after a particularly tense dinner, Jacob quietly pulled Noah aside. His voice trembled, almost inaudible. "Dad, sometimes Grace gets really mad when you're not here. She scares Emma. She yells." His eyes searched Noah's for permission to speak the truth, terrified that his words would unravel everything. Noah felt the ground shift beneath him. In that instant, every compromise, every ignored whisper of doubt, every moment he had justified came crashing down. His chest tightened, not with anger but with guilt. He had failed to protect the very people he had once vowed to devote his life to. That night, after the children were asleep, he confronted Grace. Her reaction was not denial, nor remorse, but indignation. "They're manipulating you," she said coldly. "You spoil them. You don't see how they take advantage of your weakness." It was then that Noah saw clearly what he had mistaken for stability was control cloaked in charm. The marriage he had entered for hope had become a quiet battlefield where the most vulnerable suffered first. Leaving was not dramatic. It was quiet, almost clinical. He packed her things when she was gone for the weekend. He wrote her a letter, explaining that he was choosing his children, choosing the promise he made on the night Olivia died. That no one, not even someone with good intentions, would come before their well-being. When Grace returned, there was yelling, accusations. But Noah did not waver. For the first time in a long time, he stood firm, not as a husband, not as a man trying to make something work, but as a father who had rediscovered his clarity. In the days that followed, the house was quieter again. But this time, it wasn't loneliness that filled the air. It was something sturdier. Honesty. Protection. A painful wisdom earned through regret. Noah had made a mistake. A costly one. But he would spend the rest of his life ensuring that mistake would not shape his children's future. He had once lost the love of his life. He would not lose his children, too. Years passed as they always do. The pain of betrayal faded into memory, and in its place, Noah built something unshakable. Trust between him and his children. Jacob grew more reserved, thoughtful beyond his years. Emma blossomed into a bright, sensitive girl, her laughter returning in bursts that reminded Noah of Olivia. The house, now worn but warm, pulsed with the quiet strength of a family that had endured more than it ever should have. Noah never remarried. He poured his love into being a father, into late-night study sessions, bedtime stories, scraped knees, and quiet conversations. He worked long hours as a mechanic, sometimes 2 jobs at once, his hands always calloused, his eyes tired. He never let Jacob or Emma see the bills he folded into drawers late at night, or the fear he felt every time the car made a sound he couldn't afford to fix. He never told them about the times he skipped meals so they could eat better. They never knew, because he never let it show. But children grow. And with growth came dreams that stretched far beyond their small town. Jacob, always fascinated by how things worked, got accepted into a top engineering program. Emma, now in her final years of high school, spoke of becoming a doctor, of helping children the way she once needed help herself. Their ambitions made Noah proud, so proud it almost hurt. But pride alone couldn't pay tuition. He tried everything. Scholarships, loans, extra shifts. But the numbers didn't bend. The future his children deserved was standing in front of them, and he was the only thing in the way, not for lack of love, but for lack of means. It broke something in him. He sat in the old living room one night, surrounded by memories etched into furniture, photos, walls, the ghost of Olivia in every corner. Everything they had built together. Everything they had lost. Everything he had tried to preserve. And then he made the decision. He listed the house. He sold the truck. He liquidated every small investment Olivia had started, every emergency fund he had scraped together over the years. Even her wedding ring, which he had kept hidden in a drawer, wrapped in a piece of cloth that still faintly smelled like her perfume. He let it go with trembling hands. People said he was crazy, that he was too old to start over, that the kids might not even come back once they made it out into the world. Don't sacrifice everything, they said. What will you have left? Noah never answered. He just smiled quietly and returned to work. He moved into a small rental apartment on the outskirts of town. 1 bedroom, barely furnished. He sold off most of their belongings, kept only what the children wanted to take with them and what couldn't be replaced. Photographs, Emma's baby blanket, Jacob's first science project. He told his children it was a choice, not a burden. You don't owe me anything, he said the night before Jacob left for college. This is what love looks like sometimes, quiet and hard and full of goodbye. Emma cried when she hugged him at the train station. She pressed her forehead to his chest and whispered, "I'll make it count, Dad. I promise." And he believed her. He returned home to an empty apartment, no longer filled with the sound of feet on the stairs or laughter spilling from the kitchen. Just silence. But it was a silence with purpose. At night, he'd sit by the window, watching the world carry on. And though his back ached and his hands hurt, and some nights he missed them so much it felt like losing Olivia all over again, there was something else growing in the quiet. Peace. He had given everything, every cent, every dream, every comfort. But he had done what he promised Olivia in those final, trembling moments in the hospital, that he would protect their children, raise them well, and carry the weight of their love until they could carry it themselves. He had kept that promise, even when it cost him everything. And somehow, in the quiet of that sacrifice, he had never felt more alive. Time has a strange way of folding pain into purpose. Years passed since Noah traded everything he owned for the dreams of his children. The apartment walls remained bare, his life reduced to necessities. Yet every morning, when he woke to a phone buzzing with messages, photos of classrooms, videos of experiments, voices full of excitement from miles away, he felt full in ways no house, no comfort, ever could. Jacob settled into university life with a kind of quiet determination Noah had always seen in him. But it was Emma and her best friend Lily who truly turned his thoughts skyward. Lily had grown up alongside Emma. Her family was broken in different ways, poverty and silence rather than loss, but she had found in Noah's home a refuge that softened her. The girls had been inseparable since childhood, bound by shared secrets, whispered dreams, and the deep, wordless understanding of two souls raised by hardship. When Emma spoke of becoming a doctor, Lily spoke of flying. Not metaphorically, not wistfully, literally. She wanted to be a pilot. At first, it sounded like fantasy. Where they came from, girls didn't become pilots. Girls worked, married early, survived. But Lily's eyes would light up whenever she watched the planes pass overhead. She studied flight patterns online at night. She devoured books about aviation history. And she believed. Emma, fiercely loyal, refused to chase her dreams alone. "We're doing this together," she'd told her father. "Both of us." Noah had only smiled, the same tired smile he always wore when facing something impossible. And then the impossible began to happen. Emma earned a partial scholarship to a medical program abroad. Lily, through a mix of top scores, essays poured from her heart, and a stubborn refusal to give up, was accepted into a flight training academy in the same city. Neither of them had enough to make it work. But Emma refused to leave Lily behind. So Noah did something he had never done before. He took a loan. It was a quiet, humiliating kind of desperation. The bank clerk had looked at him with a mixture of pity and disbelief. A mechanic nearing 60. No assets, no retirement. But he walked out with just enough to bridge the gap. It meant another layer of sacrifice. More nights without heat. More days without rest. But he didn't care. He watched from the airport gate as the two girls, each carrying a backpack and a lifetime of hope, waved at him from beyond the glass. Emma's eyes sparkled with gratitude, and Lily mouthed, "Thank you," through the glass, tears threatening to spill. The months that followed were quiet again. Noah returned to work, kept busy. But he followed every update like a lifeline. Emma sent voice messages late at night, full of excitement about anatomy labs, her first cadaver, the exhaustion of 14-hour days. Lily's messages were different, shorter, more scattered. She was struggling. Flight school was brutal, male-dominated, competitive, and sometimes cruel. Noah began writing her letters. Not emails. Handwritten, long-form, careful letters, stories from his youth, from the garage, from the early days of raising Emma. Lessons hidden in stories, comfort hidden in jokes. He told her he believed in her, even when she didn't. Especially when she didn't. She wrote back. She told him about the fear, the way her hands shook before simulator exams, how she heard the whispers. She won't last. She told him about the moment she almost quit, the night she cried in the dorm bathroom alone. And then, the next day, she got back in the simulator. Weeks turned into months. Then one evening, Noah got a photo. It was Lily in full pilot uniform, standing beside a training aircraft, grinning like a kid on Christmas morning. Behind her, Emma stood with both arms raised in victory. Underneath the photo, a simple caption. "We're flying, Dad. We're really flying." Noah sat alone in his apartment, holding the photo, unable to speak. He stared at it for a long time, then leaned back in his chair and let himself cry. Not the heavy kind of crying that comes with grief or fear, but the kind that rises from somewhere deeper, where love and pride and sorrow live together. The kind of crying that feels like flight. They were flying, and he had built their wings from nothing but love, sacrifice, and the faith that somehow, someday, the sky would be theirs.